However, my entrepreneur journey did start early as well. I was always finding different ways to run a business or grow a business.
Meet Traci Chen, founder of Mason Chen Law Group, a Flinders University graduate who launched a solar business as a student.
And a lot of people were looking for me, essentially, and so I realized that maybe it's time to start my own law firm.
Tracy shifted to migration law and built her firm during 2019-2020.
I know a lot of people say in business it's hard because a lot of men run businesses, a lot of male CEOs.
And now she has a team of 50 to 60 lawyers, empowering entrepreneurs and global talent to navigate complex visa pathways confidently.
And when you're working for someone, no one teaches you about the business. I learned a lot about being a lawyer, being a practitioner. I really love the law. I started my TikTok journey during COVID. It was one of the best decisions to make because at the end of the day, we got an opportunity here in Australia.
Where big dreams meet bold action. Where we share real stories, actionable insights, and the inspiration needed to transform your ideas into businesses. Are you ready to turn your ideas into success and be an inspiration to others? Join Inspirepreneur.
Hey, I'm Traci Chen. I'm the founder of Mason Chen Law Group. I have been a lawyer since 2017 and I came to Australia when I was 2 years old. My parents brought me here and we originally relocated to South Australia. I think a lot of people know that town. Adelaide is where I grew up. I actually went to Flinders University. I studied law there. And I think I really loved the law because it was an area that I had a lot of interest in, and migration law in particular, because my family, we are migrants ourselves, so it's something that really resonated with me. However, my entrepreneur journey did start early as well. I was always finding different ways to run a business or grow a business. So when I was in uni, I actually started a solar panel business. I was selling solar panels to residential homes. And I actually did that, while I was studying full-time at university. Then once I did graduate, I had to make a decision. I was working part-time at a law firm and I realized I really did enjoy the law and working in it. So I decided to kind of give up that business and then work full-time in the law. So I think when you come to Australia, Australia is a wonderful place, right? So a lot of people who are very lucky and have the opportunity to even travel to Australia, whether on a tourist visa, they get to see like this beautiful country. And yes, we've talked about the fees for studying. Unfortunately, it is a lot higher than it used to be. But I think on the flip side, what you learn and the opportunities and how it opens your eyes, I think that you can't put a price on that. I then relocated to Melbourne and then I started working for a couple of different law firms, again, specializing in migration law. That took us to 2020 when everything kind of changed. I started working in a global immigration law firm, and with COVID, everything changed. The borders closed, visas weren't being approved, and people were panicking essentially. Because I found TikTok, I thought I might as well share this information on TikTok because I can. I really had no other intention behind it. It was just something that just started purely out of just for fun. And you're home most of the time, so you have all this extra time on your hands. So I just started making TikToks. And it's very interesting because even though your friends aren't on there, there's so many other people on TikTok. And I realized that there was a lot of people who wanted to know this information. So I kept posting. I was posting 1, 2, 3 times a day at that time. Again, it was everyone was home during COVID, so we really didn't have anything else to do. After some period of time, it did blow up, went to 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 followers. And we started, and a lot of people were looking for me essentially. And so I realized that maybe it's time to start my own law firm. And that's when I started my own law firm in 2021, but it really kicked off in 2022. We really didn't do much in 2021. It was still that transition period for me. Things really started taking off in 2022. At the beginning, I was running a lot of the work and doing a lot of the matters myself. However, because I became really busy, I had to hire other lawyers and agents to work with me. And today we are a team of 50 to 60 lawyers. And that's how, Mason Chen Law Group, MCLG, is today where we are. So when my dad first came. So he came in 1989. At that time, again, it was a very different time. A lot of Chinese students came to Australia. My dad came on his own. And at that time, he had to, it wasn't easy. There wasn't as much of a community as well. So he was very much isolated, and he had to find a way to study, work, and also find his pathway to stay here in Australia. People think that it was easier back then. Maybe it was less people back then migrating, but it wasn't so much that the pathway was easier. He still had to find a pathway himself. So he migrated through his studies. He did a master's back home, and he came to Australia to do a PhD. And that's how he migrated to Australia. I remember, well, I don't remember, my mum told me. I was born in 1992, so my dad came just after my mum fell pregnant. And my mum wanted to come earlier, but my dad kept saying, don't come yet, it's very hard, let me save some money first before, you guys come here. So it wasn't until 1992 that I actually came to Australia. I didn't meet my dad for the first, essentially 2 years of my life. When we first came, it was very difficult, back then, again, you don't come with much, you don't come with money. So my family had to rebuild from the ground up. And, day by day, things do get better. And a lot of, now looking back, it was one of the best decisions to make, because at the end of the day, we got an opportunity here in Australia. I myself, when I was working in law firms, I never worked in a firm or a business of that size. I think the law firms I worked at was maybe, 5 to 10. And then I worked at a couple of law firms that were potentially a little bit bigger, but I wasn't really there for long. So you don't really get to know much about the business. And when you're working for someone, no one teaches you about the business. I learned a lot about being a lawyer, being a practitioner, but no one teaches you about how to run a business and essentially run a business with lawyers, because it's a very different business compared to other types. So I think it's hard, because who do you reach out to? When you have certain entrepreneur groups and certain business groups that you can look for information, but things are very different when you're running a law firm, because it's an area that's very heavily regulated, and you'd have to talk to other law firm owners to really understand how that business works. It's been a very eye-opening journey, I just continue to hope that we can grow and become a global name in this field. I think if you want to become a lawyer, at the heart of everything is you are to help people. I know a lot of people want to become a lawyer for whatever it may be, maybe status, maybe certain things. However, at the heart of being a lawyer, it's about helping people, and that's something to never forget. I don't think I was, terrible as a student. You do have to get certain grades to study law. I wasn't like one of those, valedictorian or number one or whatever. Definitely wasn't one of them. However, I do think I was, probably, mid-tier probably. Mid-tier, yeah, I'd say, yeah. I know a lot of people say in business it's hard because a lot of men run businesses, a lot of male CEOs. But I think if you are a female and you want to do this, I think it's really important to kind of take yourself out of that and forget that you are a woman in that sense, and just walk into a room, meet other people just as though everyone's the same. I think a lot of people step back, or a lot of women step back, or they think it's a little bit difficult because you're a woman, but I promise if you just forget it and move forward with it, you can walk into any room and just absolutely kill it. So a lot of people do ask me this question, and the way I answer it is, look, you do still have to give it a go. A lot of people are afraid to lodge the application because they think or they've heard that it's a waste of time, but that's something I completely don't agree with. I think you need to finish the course that you've already started, because you've already come this far to finish it. Get the skills assessment, lodge the application, because those invitations will come, and they will come when you least expect it. But if you try to overthink it too much and listen to this person or that person, nobody knows when the next invitation round will be. So I think it's always best to put an application in rather than overthink the process, or thinking about studying a whole new course, because if you were to study a new course, it's going to take you another 1 to 2 years. We definitely can't predict what's going to happen in another 1 to 2 years. People who say, okay, I've come to Australia, I've done a whole master's degree, and then they're like, okay, but this person told me to do another trade course. Let's just talk about trade courses first. First of all, it's another 1 year course at a bare minimum, sometimes even 2 years. Then to even become eligible for a skills assessment, you need to work for another year. That's 2 years. So you've already spent 2 years on a master's, and then someone's told you to go and spend another 2 years on a degree. You spent 4 years essentially waiting for this. I don't agree with it, because what's to say in 2 years' time that this is going to work? If you're using it as a backup option, like you've already applied for something after your master's, and then you've done all you can there, you've lodged an application, and you want to study a trade course and go down that pathway as a backup, I'm okay with that. But to completely give up what you originally came to do and then spend 4 years on this journey, it absolutely makes no sense to me. I think it's nice that you start with no intentions, because then there's less pressure on yourself, because I think a lot of people start the business, then they put pressure on themselves to start the influencer, start the TikToks and the Instagrams to bring in that business. I think for myself, because I started with no intentions and there was not much pressure, that whole process was very natural. I think a lot of people do underestimate how much and how difficult it actually is to convert that TikTok, that influencer platform to your business, because plenty of people can be influencers, but then how do you actually convert that and put that into your business? It was a lot of trial and error, and you have to work out how to set up the processes and systems. So we started off by, really researching what are the best platforms to do this on. For example, if someone makes a query through TikTok about how I can contact you, how do we actually bring them to our website? How do they actually make an appointment? And then how does that appointment translate into work that we actually do for them? It's something that I had to spend a lot of time, a lot of hours developing. And then you have to train your team to be able to execute for that. A lot of those people, if they do watch this video, they will comment and say, hey, that was me. Look, there's a lot of students who come to Australia to study and they have a pathway, and we're able to find a pathway for them and they were able to get permanent residency. That's definitely something that happens regularly. I think the most interesting ones for me are people who are maybe not in as good as a position, like they didn't come to Australia to study, so nothing's as clear for them. They might be overseas, or they might be a little bit older, or their English is not as good. And they thought they had to compete like everybody else, get an expression of interest, score 100 points to get invited. That's not particularly true. Of course, they had their own profile. So I remember one where this client, he was probably close to 40, maybe in his 40s, and had been waiting for an expression of interest invitation for years. And obviously with age and the English, I think the maximum they could score was maybe 65 points. So it was going to be very hard for them to get an invitation. However, they came to me, I looked at their profile, and they were actually a very senior person in a company. I believe he was working engineering to do with water. And I thought to myself, this is a great profile. I think Australia really wants professionals like this. So we went for the global talent visa at the time. And I'm very grateful that they just believed in me. They said, okay, let's do it. So we went and got all the documentation, prepared it, and they were invited after 6 weeks. And then their visa was granted within a couple of months. I think if they didn't come to us and they didn't know that the global talent visa was actually an option for them, they may still be waiting for an invitation now. I myself have a lot of appointments available, however, they do get booked out early. My lawyers and myself, we do have a certain price guide. But look, it comes down to the quality and service that you do get. And at the end of the day, my lawyers, they're very experienced. They're people that have studied and worked in migration law for a very long time. I pay them very well. And so at the end of the day, that's what it reflects. It reflects, their expertise in this matter. The partner visa costs almost $10,000. I think next year we should hit $10,000. I think at the beginning, I remember, and I talked about this in a podcast not long ago, at the beginning it was like $1,000 to $2,000 for the application. And I think now that they've made it $10,000, look, there is certain other increases with inflation and stuff, but it makes the threshold to apply for a partner visa a little bit higher. What I mean by that is that, so not just anyone be like, oh, let's just lodge a partner visa. It makes people think twice before they lodge a partner visa, which in turn makes it better for the Department of Home Affairs, because it helps them decide whether this relationship is genuine. The minimum is actually $76,515 now. I don't know why they had to pick that number. It's so hard to say. It's a full mouthful. But yes, that's the minimum. But it's very important to remember that that is the minimum. It's not what you actually need to pay. What you actually need to pay is market salary. So if you are sponsoring a software engineer, The market salary for a software engineer is not 76,000. It's more like 100,000. So you actually can't rely on that number. You have to rely on market salary. It's just that the minimum, the absolute minimum has to be that number. Don't get too carried away with all these things you see on the internet. I think it's really important to just put your head down, do the hard work, a lot of the repetitive work, because that is what actually creates the success afterwards. You know, a lot of people are showing things on the internet where they're doing work on the beach and all that stuff. I think a lot of it isn't that. A lot of it is doing the boring work at home and really sacrificing before you even see the first of the results. And you have to be ready for that. With the entrepreneur journey, I think a lot of it happens so quickly, and you, day by day, you could say you're putting out fires, you're kind of in all different directions, and you kind of forget a lot of the things. I haven't actually ever sat down and really reflected on it properly. Every single day I'm just like trying to, you know, do this and do that so that we can move forward as a business and also do the right thing by my employees. You know, one day when I sit down, I wonder if it isn't so much of a blur if I'm able to identify those things. But I think a lot of the true entrepreneurs, there's only the day-by-day stuff they forget because there's just so much happening on a day-to-day basis. As you grow as a business, I think other people need to step into the leadership positions. So what I am really keen on is developing other leaders and directors within my business, because it is important for their growth as well. One of our practice leaders just got promoted to director, and it was the next path in their progression. Otherwise, you know, where else are they gonna go? They can't be a practice leader or a senior lawyer forever, you know, so I think that's what I'm really focusing over the next 2 years. I really want the whole world and everyone to know about our other directors and practitioners. Came to Australia to study. I don't even actually know how they got into the position that they did, but it was a lot of misguidance where they were told to study this or apply for this. And for some reason, somehow they ended up applying for a protection visa. Now, you know that you cannot apply for protection visas unless it's a genuine claim. Our firm, we do a lot of protection visas, but we definitely conduct the research prior to make sure that there are legitimate chances to be granted a protection visa. However, they lodged a protection visa, so they were on a bridging visa waiting for that to be granted, but obviously it got refused because it wasn't a genuine claim. They came to us, they had their profile, they were working in a restaurant, so they were able to get a skills assessment as a restaurant manager. It got to a point where they had to apply for another bridging visa to stay in Australia because that protection visa got refused. They were waiting for the invitation. We lodged an application. We then saw that their profile, their occupation was being invited in another state. So we advised them to relocate to the other state. And after 3 months, they were invited for the PR. So yeah, after like, I don't know, maybe 8 years or something. A lot of our IT applicants, believe it or not, were invited through the general stream, which is the 190 or 189. So I think when a lot of people tell you, oh, it's too hard, you know, 95 points, 100 points, you won't get invited. Don't necessarily believe that. If IT is your passion and you want to graduate, you want to find a job, stick with it. Don't completely, you know, change to a trade course or whatever just because someone tells you to, because a lot of our clients, a lot of applicants do end up getting invited under that stream. I don't know what happened in the journey when they came to Australia. If someone told them that just because you study in Australia, you'll get PR. I think that's a common misconception because that's not how it works. The student visa is granted to a student so they come here to study, then they can apply for a postgraduate work visa. That is the journey, and that is essentially what is promised at the beginning. But PR is never promised. PR is something that when you come to Australia and you realize you love this country, you then decide you want to pivot and apply for it. And that's when that real journey starts. It's not because you just studied in Australia that you will get PR. And I don't know what happened in that conversation prior, but it seems that some people were promised that if you come to study, you can apply for PR. In Australia, running a business, it is heavily regulated by the ATO, you know, ASIC. So it's really important that you do set up your business properly. I think I've seen a lot of people who, you know, either set up their structures incorrectly or don't get the right advice. Again, it's going to cost a bit of money at the beginning, but I highly recommend getting that advice properly from the beginning so you set up properly for it. And when it comes to aged care, because there actually isn't a direct pathway if you study aged care, The pathway through aged care is if you study the Certificate 3, Certificate 4, and then you work in an aged care centre, potentially they can sponsor you. But even then it's not direct PR, and they have to agree to sponsor you, and they have to be eligible to sponsor you to begin with. With childcare, again, another misconception is childcare. If you are a childcare worker, again, you can only get PR if you get sponsored. There's no direct pathway for it. If you are a childcare teacher, there is some pathways.
There's a shortage of educators in childcare. There's about 21,000 short, and 1 in 4 experienced educators are planning to leave in the next 12 months.
I remember recommending people to study in 2022, and yes, they did get PR within months. However, there's a lot of people telling people to do that now, so there is a lot of competition. So if you are looking to do that, you will have to work to get the points, to look for the job, to do all those things, because it's not going to be that straightforward. When it comes to applying for a student visa in Australia, the idea behind it is that you're coming here to study. I know a lot of people are actually trying to apply for PR, but you have to start with a study first, because if you can't demonstrate that you're a genuine student, you won't get a visa to Australia. So you need to show that whatever course that you're looking to study, that you've done your research and it can really match up to what your career pathway is and how it's going to benefit you. I think passion is one thing, but to run a really successful, tight ship business, there's so many things that you need to implement, that is things that you're probably not passionate about. So things like whether it's financial literacy or looking at creating processes and systems, when it comes to the tech stuff within my business, I had to learn a lot of that. I don't think I'm particularly passionate about tech, but our business will not be able to run the way it does without that. So I think, the passion part is a very small piece of it. It can be the beginning of your journey, but as your business grows and as you grow as a person, you have to do those boring things that you most probably don't like. And it's just about working through those processes and systems, a bit of trial and error as a person, not as a lawyer. You can't make errors as a lawyer. Trial and error as a person, what you can do to improve who you are. And you never know where that career can take you. You see a lot of things online about you have to look like this or you have to say this. I think at the end of the day, if you know what you're talking about and you're an expert in your area, you're an expert in your subject matter, I think that your videos will always perform well, because people are always looking for you. It can be anything. I'm in migration, you could be an expert in another area. There is definitely people looking for answers that you have.